Hello, sweet friend. Have you ever woken up and felt your own body wasn't the partner it used to be? That simple morning rituals, a cup of coffee, a slice of toast, suddenly felt like battles you didn't sign up for? I recently met a man whose story might just give hope to anyone struggling with the invisible chains of diabetes. A few weeks ago, I ran into Frank DeLuca at a local farmer's market here in Boston. He's 71. A bakery owner whose hands have kneaded dough for decades, whose mornings were once filled with the scent of fresh bread and pastries. But Frank had been quietly fighting something far tougher than any oven or recipe, a diagnosis that threatened to slow him down: type 2 diabetes. I watched him smile as he picked up a basket of fresh blueberries, and he told me about a simple change he made each morning, a breakfast habit so easy, yet so powerful it transformed his health. Hearing him speak, I could see the relief in his eyes, the pride in regaining control over his life. It reminded me that sometimes the smallest tweaks can make the biggest difference. Have you ever felt trapped by your health, wondering if things will ever get better? Share your thoughts in the comments. You're not alone. But before I tell you about the breakfast routine that changed everything for Frank, let's take a step back. Let's go back to the life that shaped him. The experiences, the struggles, the victories, and the lessons, and see how he reached that moment of transformation. If you've faced something similar, let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe if you believe everyone deserves a second chance at good health. Frank DeLuca was born on a chilly November morning in 1954 in a cozy brick-lined neighborhood of Boston, Massachusetts. His parents, Italian immigrants, had come to America with little more than hope and a few cherished family recipes tucked in their hearts. From the very beginning, Frank's life smelled of fresh bread and simmering tomato sauce, the aromas of his childhood home shaping his earliest memories. As a boy, Frank was curious about everything. He would follow his father into the small bakery he ran on weekends, watching flour dust dance in the morning sunlight, the warm ovens glowing like a promise. Those early days, filled with laughter, the clatter of pans, and the comforting hum of family chatter, planted a seed in him, a love for baking and a respect for hard work. School was a mix of excitement and challenge. Frank wasn't the fastest runner or the sharpest in math, but he had a way of connecting with people that drew others in. Teachers noticed his eagerness to help classmates and his ability to stay calm under pressure, traits that would serve him well later in life. Reading and history fascinated him, giving him dreams that reached beyond the bakery counters, dreams of exploring the world, but always returning to the comfort of home. Even as a child, Frank showed a tender heart. He would sneak extra cookies to neighbors who were lonely, or share his lunch with a classmate who forgot theirs. Those small acts of kindness became a quiet hallmark of his character, teaching him the value of compassion and patience. By the time Frank turned 10, he was already experimenting with baking on his own, trying to replicate his mother's famous ricotta-filled pastries. Sometimes they were perfect, sometimes disasters, but he loved the process, the feel of dough, the transformation of ingredients into something nourishing and joyful. Those wonder-filled years weren't just about learning a craft. They were about learning life itself. The rhythms of patience, dedication, and love, all kneaded together like a perfect loaf. It was during these early years that Frank, unknowingly, began shaping the resilience and heart that would later carry him through trials he never could have imagined. Frank's teenage years were a mix of curiosity, rebellion, and discovery. As a boy who had grown up kneading dough in his parents' bakery, he suddenly found himself navigating the unpredictable terrain of adolescence. The awkwardness of high school, the thrill of newfound independence, and the endless questions about who he wanted to be. At 15, Frank started working part-time in the bakery on his own, filling in for his father on early mornings. While his friends hung out at the local diner or skateboarded through the streets of Boston, Frank found a strange sense of freedom in the quiet hours before sunrise. The smell of fresh bread, the warmth of the ovens, and the rhythm of rolling pins gave him a sense of purpose, but also a subtle tension. He wanted to explore the world outside the bakery walls, yet he felt a pull toward the family business, toward the life he knew so well. Friendships became his anchor. He found kindred spirits in a small group of classmates who shared his love for music and sports. They would sneak out after school, dreaming of adventures far from Boston, laughing about plans that would never fully materialize. But even as he laughed, Frank began to understand the delicate balance between freedom and responsibility, a lesson he would carry with him for decades. Romance, too, made its first entrance. A shy crush on a classmate left him both exhilarated and nervous, the confusion of teenage emotions mingling with the scent of vanilla frosting from the bakery next door. These early experiences shaped Frank's heart, teaching him about patience, longing, and the courage to take small risks. It was a time of self-discovery. Frank experimented with new recipes, sometimes failing spectacularly, other times creating treats that even his father praised. Each success and failure was a quiet lesson. The world was bigger than the bakery, yet the values he learned at home, dedication, patience, and love, would always guide him. By the time Frank graduated high school, he felt ready to step into adulthood, carrying with him a budding confidence, a love for creation, and the first whispers of dreams that would one day define his life. After high school, Frank's life took on a new rhythm. He enrolled in a local culinary program, determined to refine the skills he had learned from his parents, while dreaming of opening his own bakery someday. The excitement of early adulthood was intoxicating, filled with ambition, friendships, and the inevitable challenges that come with stepping out into the world. Frank landed his first job at a bustling Boston cafe, kneading dough before dawn, frosting pastries late into the night. The work was grueling, but it gave him his first taste of independence, of earning his own money, making his own decisions, and facing the world on his terms. He tasted both success and disappointment. A perfect batch of croissants could win admiration, while a simple oversight might draw criticism. These moments, small as they seemed, shaped his character and built a quiet resilience. Love entered his life in unexpected ways. Frank met Maria, a spirited woman with a laugh that could light up any room during a local cooking class. Their connection was immediate, their shared passion for food and family binding them together. Their courtship was filled with adventures, weekend hikes, late-night bakery experiments, and long talks about dreams and fears. Frank felt alive in a way he never had before, yet the early struggles of adulthood reminded him that life was rarely simple. Alongside the joys, there were detours. Financial struggles forced him to take odd jobs beyond the kitchen. A brief stint delivering supplies, repairing equipment, or helping at local fairs. Some days felt like a test of endurance, but each detour taught him humility, patience, and the value of perseverance. Even failure had its lessons. It showed him that ambition alone wasn't enough. Heart, resilience, and adaptability mattered just as much. By his mid-20s, Frank had tasted the bittersweet mix of hope, disappointment, love, and responsibility. He understood that life was rarely linear, that dreams sometimes paused, detours appeared, and setbacks were inevitable. Yet, through it all, the spark of ambition burned brightly, lighting the path toward the life he would one day build. By his late 20s, Frank had taken the leap many young adults dream about but few dare. He opened his own bakery in the heart of Boston. It was a modest space at first, the smell of fresh bread and sweet pastries spilling into the streets, attracting neighbors, students, and early morning commuters. But more than the aroma, it was Frank's warmth, his attention to detail, and his genuine care for everyone who walked through the door that made the bakery thrive. Around the same time, Frank and Maria tied the knot in a small ceremony surrounded by family and friends. Their love, which had blossomed over shared dough and late-night recipe experiments, became the foundation of his new life. Parenthood followed soon after. Their daughter, Sophia, brought new dimensions of joy and responsibility. Frank found himself balancing ovens, early mornings, and late-night feedings with a quiet determination he hadn't realized he possessed. Life was full, sometimes overwhelmingly so. There were days when he questioned whether he could handle it all. The financial pressure of running a business, the constant responsibilities at home, and the desire to continue creating in the kitchen. Yet, these challenges also revealed the depth of his strength. He learned to savor small victories, a perfectly baked loaf, a child's laughter, or a quiet moment with Maria after a long day. Frank's relationships, too, deepened. Friends from childhood remained a cherished support system, while neighbors and customers became an extended family. Every interaction, whether sharing a new pastry or offering advice, reminded him that life was not just about success, but about connection. Through these years, Frank began to understand the delicate dance of balancing personal dreams with family duties. It wasn't always easy, but it was rich, meaningful, and deeply human. And even in the chaos of running a bakery, raising a child, and nurturing a marriage, Frank's passion for creating, caring, and giving never wavered. Life, as it often does, tested Frank in ways he hadn't anticipated. By his 40s, the weight of responsibilities, the bakery, family bills, and caring for aging parents began to press heavily on his shoulders. Long hours took a toll on his body, and the sweet indulgences he had once enjoyed freely became silent enemies, especially as his health began to subtly shift. Financial challenges struck unexpectedly. A sudden surge in rent, coupled with rising ingredient costs, forced him to stretch every dollar. There were months when he questioned whether he could keep the bakery alive. Yet, every time he felt despair creeping in, he remembered why he started: the joy of creating, the smiles on customers' faces, and the support of his family. But it wasn't just money. Emotional struggles crept in quietly. The relentless pace left little time for rest, and Frank often felt a gnawing exhaustion that neither sleep nor coffee could fix. Nights became restless, and mornings brought a subtle anxiety he hadn't known before. Then came the first health scare. During a routine checkup, Frank's doctor warned him about elevated blood sugar levels. "You're at risk for type 2 diabetes," the doctor said gently but firmly. It was a moment that shook him to the core. The thought of losing control over his own body, the very tool he relied on to knead dough, bake bread, and wake before sunrise, was terrifying. This period of Frank's life was a turning point. He realized that ambition and hard work alone weren't enough. His health had to be part of the equation. It was a wake-up call, a moment that would eventually lead him to the simple, transformative breakfast trick that changed his life. By his 50s, Frank's bakery had become a Boston staple. Locals flocked to his shop not just for the bread and pastries, but for the warmth he radiated with every interaction. Awards, newspaper features, and community recognition came his way, symbols of the hard work he had poured into his dream. On the outside, everything seemed perfect: success, admiration, and a thriving business. Yet, the climb came with a cost. Long hours, early mornings, and weekends spent kneading dough left little time for himself. Birthdays passed unnoticed, family dinners were sometimes missed, and the quiet moments with Maria became rare. The very ambition that built his success had also carved out cracks in his personal life. Frank began to notice subtle signs: lingering fatigue, irritability, and moments of forgetfulness that reminded him that no achievement could replace good health. Emotionally, he felt stretched. His daughter, now a teenager, was growing fast, and he worried he wasn't always there to guide her through life's twists. Friendships sometimes waned under the weight of responsibility, and even though he loved the bakery, the physical strain of years of labor became increasingly apparent. Frank's story during this period was one of bittersweet triumph. He had achieved his dreams, but he had also learned that success without balance came at a tangible cost. It was a lesson that would become all the more urgent as he approached the next stage of his life. A stage where his health would no longer be something he could ignore. As Frank entered his late 50s, life seemed to shift in quiet, profound ways. His daughter was preparing for college, and the bakery had stabilized, allowing him slightly more breathing room. Yet, with these changes came reflection. Time had a way of revealing priorities, and Frank began to notice the subtle but steady toll that years of stress and indulgence had taken on his body. He found himself thinking more about the future, about longevity, vitality, and the life he still wanted to enjoy with Maria. Relationships evolved. Longtime friends who had once been constants in his life now lived farther away, while some acquaintances faded into memory. Yet, those connections that endured grew stronger, offering support and shared wisdom that Frank treasured deeply. He also became more introspective about his work. Baking remained a joy, but he realized that the rhythm of early mornings and endless preparation, while fulfilling, also demanded respect for his own limits. Even the simple act of tasting his creations, something he had once done without thought, became a reminder of the careful balance between pleasure and health. During these years, Frank's awareness of his body sharpened. Occasional fatigue, slight dizziness, and creeping weight gain could no longer be dismissed. Friends whispered about diet changes and daily exercise, but old habits die hard, and he wrestled internally with the tension between routine and the need for transformation. These midlife reflections planted the seed for a pivotal shift. Frank knew something had to change before minor issues became major crises. It was the beginning of a period of self-discovery, a time when he would confront his limitations and, ultimately, find the simple morning ritual that would turn his life around. As Frank approached his early 70s, the bustling days of the bakery slowly gave way to a gentler rhythm. He had begun scaling back, training younger bakers to carry the workload while he focused on mentoring and quality control. At first, it felt liberating. Mornings without the relentless oven heat, afternoons spent reading or walking along Boston's waterfront. But freedom came with a new awareness. The aches and stiffness he had brushed off for decades now demanded attention. Nights became restless. Fatigue lingered even after long stretches of sleep. His doctor reminded him more than once that years of indulgence and long hours could no longer be ignored. The most concerning warning came when his blood sugar readings climbed steadily. Frank, who had always taken pride in his resilience, suddenly felt fragile. Everyday activities became subtle tests of endurance. A quick walk to the park left him winded. Climbing the stairs in his home felt heavier than it once had. Even standing for long stretches in the bakery during occasional shifts reminded him that his body was no longer an endless resource. It was during this period that Frank realized slowing down wasn't just about leisure. It was about listening to a body that had been quietly signaling for care. Emotionally, it was a bittersweet time. He cherished the slower pace, the extra moments with Maria, and the freedom to reflect on decades of work and family. Yet, there was also a quiet anxiety. The fear of a health decline that could steal independence, the looming shadow of diabetes that had crept in unnoticed. Frank knew he had to confront these challenges, or the life he loved could slip away. Despite his attempts to pace himself, Frank's health eventually reached a tipping point. One morning, he woke feeling dizzy, with a pounding heart and a clouded mind. Simple tasks, like preparing breakfast or walking to the corner store, left him exhausted. His blood sugar readings had spiked dangerously, and the doctor's words finally landed with full weight. If you don't make changes now, this could escalate quickly. The realization hit hard. Frank, the man who had built a thriving bakery from scratch, who had spent decades caring for others, now faced the very real possibility of losing control over his own life. Fear, frustration, and a sense of helplessness washed over him. Daily routines became battles. He skipped outings because his body couldn't keep up, avoided social events for fear of complications, and felt guilt over the worry he caused Maria and Sophia. The life he had meticulously built seemed to teeter on the edge. Yet, amid the despair, there was a spark, a quiet determination. Frank knew he couldn't change the past, but he could take control of his present and future. It was this moment, painful and raw, that pushed him to seek a solution seriously. He began listening to advice from his doctor, exploring diet changes, and paying attention to small tips from friends who had faced similar struggles. It was during this vulnerable stage that Frank discovered a simple, transformative breakfast trick. A change so subtle, yet so powerful, it would ultimately help him regain his health, energy, and confidence. And it all began with one small step in the morning, every single day. One chilly morning, while sharing coffee with an old friend at a local cafe, Frank mentioned his ongoing struggles with blood sugar and fatigue. His friend, a retired nurse, leaned in and said something that would change Frank's life. "You know, sometimes the simplest changes in your morning routine can make all the difference." Curious, Frank listened closely as she explained a particular breakfast approach, one focused on balancing protein, fiber, and a few key natural ingredients known to stabilize blood sugar. She cited recent studies from the American Diabetes Association showing that a mindful, nutrient-dense breakfast can reduce spikes in glucose levels and improve energy throughout the day. For Frank, who had spent decades crafting pastries loaded with sugar and flour, this advice felt both intimidating and intriguing. Rather than overhauling his diet overnight, he started small. He replaced his usual sweet roll with a breakfast consisting of oatmeal topped with a handful of nuts, a few berries, and a small spoon of Greek yogurt. It was simple, manageable, and something he could sustain daily. The idea wasn't about strict deprivation, but about introducing a gentle, consistent habit that could gradually retrain his body. Frank's discovery wasn't a dramatic cure. It was a mindful, realistic approach to reclaiming control over his health. The trick was simple, yet it demanded consistency and patience. For a man who had spent decades rising before dawn, kneading dough and crafting pastries, this small change became his first real victory against diabetes. He recalls thinking that day, "If something this small can make a difference, maybe there's hope yet." It was the spark of hope he had been waiting for, the tangible first step toward healing. And it all started with breakfast. Frank committed to his new routine with quiet determination. Each morning, he prepared his oatmeal with nuts and berries, savoring it slowly instead of rushing into the day. Within the first week, he noticed subtle changes, slightly more energy, a calmer mind, and fewer blood sugar spikes. Small wins built momentum. He gradually complemented the breakfast routine with a short morning walk along Boston's Harbor Walk, breathing in the crisp air and moving his body without overexertion. He started drinking more water, cutting down on late-night pastries, and checking his glucose levels consistently. Each adjustment was a gentle step toward reclaiming his health. Weeks turned into months. Frank's energy returned. The dizziness and fatigue that had once defined his mornings began to fade. He found joy again in baking, experimenting with healthier versions of his favorite recipes, sharing them with customers who were eager to taste his new creations. His doctor noticed improvements, his blood sugar stabilized, and his overall well-being soared. Emotionally, Frank felt a lightness he hadn't experienced in years. Confidence replaced anxiety, and hope replaced frustration. He began connecting with friends again, walking with Maria in the evenings, and savoring life's simple pleasures without fear. Frank's journey wasn't about perfection. It was about commitment, consistency, and small, mindful changes that created lasting results. The transformation wasn't just physical, it was mental and emotional. He rediscovered the joy of living fully, knowing that the choices he made each morning truly mattered. If you've ever tried something similar, share your story in the comments below, he often says, hoping others might find inspiration in his experience. For Frank, it wasn't just a breakfast routine, it was a lifeline that restored his health, his energy, and his outlook on life. Today, Frank's life is a testament to the power of small, consistent changes. The bakery still thrives, but now he moves through each day with renewed energy and a sense of peace he hadn't felt in decades. His blood sugar is under control, his stamina has returned, and he feels more connected to Maria, Sophia, and the community that has supported him all these years. He often reflects on his journey with a mixture of humility and gratitude. "I wish I had listened to my body sooner," he admits, "but I'm grateful I finally did." The simple breakfast habit that seemed so minor at first became a cornerstone of his well-being. It wasn't a miracle cure, but it was a consistent, manageable routine that gave him back his life. Frank also shares his story with friends and customers, hoping to inspire others who might be struggling quietly. He reminds them that health isn't about drastic measures or overnight success. It's about listening to your body, making small adjustments, and staying committed over time. For Frank, this new chapter isn't just about controlling diabetes. It's about reclaiming joy, energy, and the freedom to live life fully. His journey stands as a quiet but powerful reminder. It's never too late to make a change. Every morning is a chance to invest in your health, and every small choice matters. Frank now wakes up with purpose, savoring his breakfast and the peace it brings, knowing that this simple habit protects his health and fuels his passions. If this story inspired you, like this video, and if you believe in second chances, don't forget to subscribe, he says, smiling. For Frank, life has come full circle. From the flower-dusted mornings of childhood to a healthier, happier adulthood, all grounded in love, resilience, and mindful choices. Every time I meet someone like Frank, I'm reminded that life has a way of giving second chances, if we're willing to listen and act. His story teaches us that change doesn't have to be dramatic. Sometimes it begins with a single, simple step, like a mindful breakfast. No matter your age, no matter the struggles you face, it's never too late to take back control of your health, your energy, and your life. Thanks for sharing this time with me, my friends. Until next time, cherish each day, take care of your body, and stay hopeful. Because small changes can lead to remarkable transformations.